The silence in the first-class cabin of Flight 409 was heavy, broken only by the sharp, rhythmic tapping of Captain Brock Holloway's polished boot against the aisle carpet. He loomed over seat 1A, his face twisted in a sneer that he didn't bother to hide from the other wealthy passengers. "I don't care who you think you are, or what kind of diversity quota ticket got you in here." He spat, his voice dripping with condescension. "This seat belongs to a VIP. You need to grab your bag and move to the back now." The woman in seat 1A didn't flinch. She simply adjusted her glasses, looked him dead in the eye, and smiled a smile that would soon cost him his entire career. He thought he was clearing trash. He had no idea he was evicting the landlord. The morning sun over JFK International Airport was blinding, glinting off the polished aluminum bodies of the jets lined up at Terminal 4. Among them sat the pride of the fleet, the Vanguard Horizon 787 Dreamliner, a vessel that represented the pinnacle of modern luxury aviation. To the world, Vanguard Horizon was the new titan in the sky, a boutique airline that had swallowed smaller competitors and promised a golden age experience. Dr. Vera Toussaint adjusted the strap of her leather tote bag as she navigated the crowded terminal. She wasn't wearing the sharp, tailored power suits she usually donned for board meetings in Zurich or Singapore. Today she wore a simple, cream-colored cashmere sweater, dark denim jeans, and a pair of comfortable loafers. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, unassuming bun. To the untrained eye, she looked like a tired graduate student, or perhaps a weary traveler visiting family. That was exactly the point. Vera paused near the massive glass windows, watching the ground crew load luggage into the belly of the aircraft. A faint smile touched her lips. 6 months ago, her private equity firm Toussaint & Couture had quietly acquired a majority stake in Vanguard Horizon. The acquisition had been handled through shell corporations and proxies. As far as the public and the employees knew, the airline was run by a faceless board of directors. Vera wanted to know the truth about her investment. She didn't want the red carpet rolled out. She didn't want the chairman's treatment, where the champagne was pre-poured and the smiles were practiced. She wanted to see how her staff treated the nobodies, so she had booked a ticket under her maiden name, Vera Lewis. She had purchased a full-fare first-class ticket seat 1A to test the premium service standards. "Excuse me," a sharp voice cut through her thoughts. Vera turned. A tall man in a pilot's uniform was barging through the crowd, pulling a heavy flight case behind him. He was handsome in a conventional jagged way. Square jaw, blonde hair, swept back aviator sunglasses, perched on his head. 4 gold stripes on his epaulettes identified him as the captain. "You're blocking the crew lane," he muttered, not even making eye contact as he brushed past her, his shoulder, checking hers hard enough to make her stumble. "Apologies," Vera said, regaining her balance. "I didn't realize—" "Yeah, well, situational awareness helps," the captain grunted, continuing his march toward the gate without looking back. Vera watched him go, her eyes narrowing slightly. She noted the name on his ID badge as he flashed it to the security agent, Holloway. Captain Brock Holloway. She mentally filed the name away. Rudeness in the terminal was one thing. How he flew the plane was another. But it wasn't a good start. She approached the gate agent, a young man named Kevin, who looked overwhelmed. He scanned her boarding pass. "Seat 1A. Kevin said, his eyebrows raising slightly as he looked at her attire. He typed something on his keyboard. "Just so you know, ma'am, the overhead bins in first are reserved for oversized items. You might want to check that tote bag to avoid clutter." Vera looked at her bag. It was small, expensive leather, and perfectly compliant. "It fits under the seat, Kevin." "Thank you." He shrugged, handing her the pass. "Suit yourself. Boarding is open." Walking down the jet bridge, the air changed. It became cooler, smelling of recycled oxygen and expensive sanitizer. Vera stepped onto the plane and turned left toward the first-class cabin. It was a sanctuary of beige leather and walnut wood trim. She found seat 1A. It was a suite, really a fully enclosed pod with a sliding door. She placed her bag down and sat exhaling a long breath. She closed her eyes, ready to observe. A flight attendant appeared almost instantly. Her name tag read, Tiffany. She was impeccably groomed, her makeup sharp, her smile tight and assessing. Tiffany's eyes did a quick sweep of Vera the jeans, the lack of visible jewelry, the simple hair. The smile faltered by a fraction of a millimeter. "Welcome aboard," Tiffany said, her tone professional, but lacking warmth. "Can I take your coat?" "I'll keep it, thanks," Vera said softly. "Could I get some water?" "We're doing pre-departure champagne service for first class," Tiffany said, her hand resting on the back of seat 1B. "Water is available after takeoff." Vera paused. "I believe the manual for Vanguard Horizon states that pre-departure beverages include champagne orange juice or still water upon guest request." Tiffany blinked, clearly annoyed that this passenger knew the policy. "Right. I'll see if we have a bottle open." She spun on her heel and walked toward the galley. Vera shook her head slightly. Strike two, she thought. She pulled out a notebook from her bag and made a small notation. The plane began to fill. The noise level rose as passengers shuffled past the first-class entrance toward economy. Vera watched the flow of people, feeling a protective urge over the metal bird. This was her asset. These were her customers. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the front door. "No. I specifically requested the bulkhead. My assistant confirmed it this morning." The voice was shrill, demanding, and getting louder. Vera leaned forward slightly to see past the partition. A woman was standing at the galley entrance, flanked by two porters carrying an absurd amount of Louis Vuitton luggage. She was draped in a faux fur coat, despite the climate-controlled cabin, and her fingers were adorned with rings that looked heavy enough to impair circulation. This was Mrs. Beatrice Vanderholt. Vera recognized her from the society pages, a real estate heiress known for her temper tantrums and her litigious nature. Tiffany, the flight attendant, looked panicked. "Mrs. Vanderholt, welcome back. We have you in seat 2A. It's a wonderful window seat." "I don't want 2A, Beatrice barked, pulling off her sunglasses to reveal eyes heavily lined with kohl. "I want 1A. I always sit in 1A. It's the only seat with the extra 3 inches of legroom for my support dog." She gestured to a small, trembling Pomeranian in a carrier that one of the porters was holding. "Ma'am," Tiffany stammered, looking at her manifest. "Seat 1A is already occupied." Beatrice Vanderholt turned her head slowly, her gaze piercing into the first-class cabin until it landed on Vera. Vera didn't look away. She offered a polite, neutral nod. Beatrice's lip curled. She turned back to Tiffany, lowering her voice to a loud whisper that was meant to be heard. "Occupied by her. There must be a mistake. Is she a staff member? A deadhead pilot?" I don't believe so, ma'am," Tiffany said, caught between a rock and a hard place. "Well, fix it," Beatrice snapped, snapping her fingers. "I am a Platinum Horizon member. I have flown this airline since it was a crop duster. I am not sitting in row 2 while some tourist takes my spot. Get the captain." Vera sighed, reopening her notebook. And here we go, she thought. The tension in the cabin was palpable. Other first-class passengers were pretending to read their tablets or look out the windows, but every ear was tuned to the drama unfolding at the front. Tiffany rushed into the cockpit, presumably to fetch the highest authority on the plane. Beatrice van der Holt stood her ground in the aisle, tapping a manicured nail against the leather headrest of seat 1B. She glared at Vera, expecting the woman to wither under the social pressure and offer to move. Vera remained calm. She pulled a pair of noise-cancelling headphones from her bag. Vanguard branded, she noted with approval, and placed them over her ears, though she didn't turn them on. She wanted to hear everything. Moments later, the cockpit door opened. Captain Brock Halloway emerged. He had removed his sunglasses, but the arrogant set of his jaw remained. He looked annoyed at being disturbed during his pre-flight checks. "What is the problem, Tiffany?" Brock asked, his voice booming. "Captain," Beatrice interjected before the flight attendant could speak. She stepped into his personal space, placing a hand on his arm familiarly. "Brock, darling, you remember me." Brock's expression softened instantly into a practiced charm. "Mrs. van der Holt, Beatrice, of course it's always a pleasure." "Is it?" she pouted. "Because your ground staff seems to have made a dreadful error. I'm supposed to be in 1A. My dog needs the space. And yet—" She gestured dramatically toward Vera. Brock turned his gaze toward seat 1A. When he saw Vera, the charm evaporated. He saw a woman in denim and a sweater sitting in the most expensive seat on his plane, looking entirely too comfortable. He did a quick mental calculation. Mrs. van der Holt was old money, a frequent flyer who likely spent $50,000 a year with the airline. The woman in 1A. She looked like an upgrade. Maybe a lottery winner. Maybe an employee on a pass using a loophole. He walked over to Vera's seat. He didn't bend down to eye-level the standard procedure for de-escalating passenger conflicts. He stood at his full height, looming over her. "Ma'am," Brock said. Vera slid the headphones down to her neck. "Yes, Captain. I need to see your boarding pass." It wasn't a request. It was a demand. Vera reached into her pocket and produced the slip of paper. She handed it to him. Brock scanned it, looking for the code that would indicate a non-revenue passenger or a discount ticket. He frowned. It was a full-fare code F Flex, paid in cash. He handed it back, but his demeanor didn't change. "Okay, here's the situation. We have a double booking error, a system glitch." "My ticket seems valid," Vera said calmly. "I booked this 3 weeks ago." "Technology fails," Brock said dismissively. "The lady standing over there is a Platinum member. She requires the bulkhead for medical reasons regarding her support animal. I'm going to need you to swap seats with her." "I see," Vera said. "And what seat is she in?" "She is in 2A. Vera looked at Beatrice, who was smirking triumphantly. Then she looked back at the captain. "Actually, Captain Seat 2A has significantly less privacy and is near the galley noise. I paid for 1A specifically for the workspace and the quiet. I declined the swap." The air left the room. Nobody said no to a captain, especially not a black woman in jeans facing down a senior pilot and a wealthy socialite. Brock's face reddened. "I don't think you understand. I'm asking you nicely." "And I'm answering you clearly," Vera replied, her voice steady, an iron rod wrapped in velvet. "I have a valid contract for this seat. The system did not glitch. If Mrs. van der Holt requires a bulkhead for a support animal, and none are available, then perhaps she should take the next flight." Or perhaps, Vera glanced at the empty seat across the aisle 1F. She can take 1F. I don't want 1F, Beatrice shrieked. The window is on the wrong side. The sun will be in my eyes during the descent. Brock held up a hand to silence Beatrice, his eyes fixed on Vera. He was losing control of his cabin, and his ego was taking a bruising. Look, Brock said, leaning in closer, invading her personal space. I don't know how you got the money for this ticket. Maybe you saved up for a lifetime trip. Maybe it's a gift. But let me explain how the real world works. Loyalty matters. Status matters. Mrs. Vanderholt basically pays for the fuel in this jet. You're a one-time blip on the radar. Vera's hands tightened slightly on her lap, but her face remained impassive. Are you implying, Captain, that my money is worth less than hers? I'm implying that you are being difficult, Brock snapped. And I don't like difficult passengers on my ship. Now you can move to 2A voluntarily, or I can find you a seat in economy. Those are your options. That is a violation of the contract of carriage, Vera said. Section 4, paragraph 2. Involuntary downgrades are only permitted for safety or weight balance issues. This is neither. Brock laughed a harsh, barking sound. You're quoting the rule book to me, lady. I am the rule book at 30,000 feet. You want to talk legal? Fine. I can declare you a security risk for failing to follow crew instructions. Then you don't fly at all. You get escorted off by the port authority. Beatrice chuckled from the aisle. Oh, do that, Brock. She's being so aggressive. It's making me feel unsafe. Vera looked from the pilot to the heiress. The accusation of being aggressive was a tired, weaponized trope she had dealt with her entire life, from boarding school to the boardroom. But to hear it here on her own airline from her own employee, it was infuriating. But Vera Toussaint didn't get mad. She got strategic. Captain Halloway, she said, her voice dropping to a chilly register, I strongly suggest you return to the cockpit and perform your pre-flight checks. I am not moving, and if you attempt to remove me, you will regret it. Brock's eyes widened. He took a step back, nodding slowly. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. Brock turned to Tiffany. Call the gate agent back down, and get port authority on the line. We have a disruptive passenger in 1A who is refusing orders and making threats. He looked back at Vera, a sneer curling his lip. You wanted to play hardball, fine. You're done. Get your bag. Vera didn't move. She simply reached into her tote bag and pulled out her phone. Put the phone away, Brock shouted. Federal regulations prohibit. We are at the gate, Captain, Vera said, unlocking the screen. And I'm not calling a friend. I'm checking the company directory. Get her off my plane, Brock snarled to the approaching gate agents. Now. Two large men in high-visibility vests entered the cabin looking uncomfortable. The other passengers were whispering furiously. A young man in 3A was filming the entire interaction on his smartphone. Ma'am, the first agent said, the captain has refused you transport. You need to come with us. Vera looked at the agent. He was just doing his job. She stood up slowly. She wasn't going to be dragged out. She would walk out with dignity, and then she would bring the sky crashing down. Very well, Vera said, smoothing her sweater. She looked at Brock Halloway one last time. You have made a decision today, Captain. I hope you are prepared to live with the consequences. Yeah. Save the speech. Brock waved her off, turning his back to her, to smile at Beatrice. Beatrice 1A is all yours. Tiffany, bring Mrs. Vanderholt a glass of the Dom Perignon. The good stuff. As Vera stepped into the aisle, Mrs. Vanderholt brushed past her, hip-checking her into the seat frame. "Finally," the heiress muttered. "Some people just don't know their place." Vera walked down the aisle, the eyes of the entire first-class cabin burning into her back. She didn't look down. She looked ahead, her mind already composing the email that would ground this plane before it even left the tarmac. She stepped off the plane and onto the jet bridge. The cool air hit her face. "Ma'am, we need to take you to the police desk to file a report," the gate agent said. "No," Vera said, stopping in the middle of the bridge. She turned to the agent. "You need to take me to the operations tower. Now." The agent blinked. "I can't do that." "Who are you?" Vera pulled a slim black card from her wallet. It wasn't a credit card. It was a matte black ID with a gold microchip and the holographic logo of Vanguard Horizon embossed in the center. Under her name, it didn't say passenger. It read, "Owner. Priority clearance level Apex." She held it up. "My name is Dr. Vera Toussaint. I own this airline, and nobody is taking off until I say so." The gate agent Kevin stared at the black card in Vera's hand as if it were a radioactive isotope. The gold chip caught the fluorescent lights of the jet bridge, and the word owner seemed to pulse. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. "Dr. Toussaint," he stammered, his voice cracking. I had no idea. The manifest just said, Lewis. The captain." "Breathe, Kevin." Vera said, her tone calm but urgent. "You were doing your job based on the information you had. Captain Halloway, however, was not. Now take me to the operations tower. Immediately." Yes, ma'am. Right this way." Kevin grabbed his radio, speaking into it with a tremor. "Central, this is gate B4. I have a VIP escort to the tower. Priority 1. Clear the corridors." They moved quickly through the terminal, bypassing the security checkpoints through employee-only access doors. Vera walked with a stride that shed her previous, tired student persona. She was now a predator on the hunt. Her mind was racing, cataloging the violation's discrimination failure to de-escalate violation of the contract of carriage and arguably endangerment by removing a compliant passenger without cause. They reached the elevator to the control tower. The doors slid open to reveal the nerve center of Vanguard Horizon's JFK operations. It was a room filled with screens, blinking lights, and the low hum of radio chatter. Men and women in headsets were coordinating the ballet of baggage carts, fuel trucks, and aircraft. In the center of the room stood Director Arthur Miller, the station manager. He was a man who lived by schedules and efficiency. He looked up, annoyed at the intrusion, until he saw Kevin's terrified face and the woman standing beside him. "Can I help you?" Miller asked, standing up. "This is a restricted area." Vera didn't waste time. She walked straight to the main console, overlooking the tarmac. Through the slanted glass, she could see Flight 409. The jet bridge had been pulled back. The tug was already attached to the nose gear, ready to push the massive aircraft back for taxi. "Mr. Miller," Vera said, not looking at him, "order the tug to disconnect from Flight 409. Do not let that plane push back." Miller blinked. "Excuse me. Who are you?" Vera tossed the black ID card onto his desk. It landed with a heavy clack. Miller picked it up. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the card, then at Vera, then back at the card. He recognized the name Toussaint. It was the name on the paychecks. It was the name on the whispered memos from Zurich. It was the name of the entity that had bought the airline 6 months ago. "Dr. Toussaint," Miller whispered. He stood up straighter, buttoning his jacket. We weren't notified of a site visit. I would have prepared." "Stop the plane, Arthur," she commanded. Miller grabbed his radio mic. "Ground, this is Miller. Hold pushback on Vanguard 409. I repeat, hold pushback. Do not release brakes." On the tarmac below, the small tug vehicle froze. "Thank you," Vera said, turning to face him. "Now I need you to pull up the cockpit voice recorder feed, the live audio loop if you have it, and the passenger manifest for Flight 409. And get corporate HR in Chicago on a video link. Tell them it's a code red." "What is happening?" Miller asked, his hands flying across his keyboard to comply. "Is there a security threat on board?" "There is a threat to the integrity of this company," Vera said coldly. "Captain Halloway just evicted me from my own aircraft because he didn't like the way I looked and he wanted to give my seat to his friend." The silence in the operations room was absolute. Every headset came off. Every eye turned to Vera. He kicked you off?" Miller asked, horrified. "He told me I didn't belong in first class," Vera said, her voice devoid of emotion, but heavy with implication. "He called me a one-time blip. He threatened to have me arrested by the port authority." Miller looked ill. He knew Halloway. He knew the man was a good pilot, but a nightmare of an employee, arrogant, dismissive, difficult. But this was career suicide on a nuclear scale. "What do you want to do, Dr. Toussaint?" Miller asked. Vera looked out the window at the gleaming silver plane. "I want that plane brought back to the gate. I want the jet bridge reconnected, and I want you to accompany me on board. It seems Captain Halloway needs a reminder of who signs his checks." "Yes, ma'am," Miller said. He keyed the radio again. "Tower to Vanguard 409. Cancel taxi clearance. Return to gate immediately. Hard stand, B4. Inside the cockpit of Flight 409, Captain Brock Halloway was feeling excellent. He adjusted the throttle quadrant, checking the engine pressure ratios. Beside him, his first officer, a young man named David, looked uneasy. "Captain," David said tentatively, "that woman, she was really calm. Usually when people get kicked off, they scream. She just quoted the manual." "Lawyers," Brock scoffed, waving a hand. "Everyone thinks they're a lawyer these days because they read a blog post. Don't worry about it, kid. I did us a favor. Beatrice Vander Holt is going to write a commendation letter for the crew. That goes into our file. That's how you get bonuses. You protect the high-value assets." "But the manifest said she was full fare," David pressed. "If she complains to corporate, let her complain to the automated email bot." Brock laughed. "I'm Captain Brock Halloway. I have 20 years of perfect flying. They aren't going to touch me over one seat dispute." He picked up the interphone handset. "Tiffany, how's the cabin?" settled Skipper. Tiffany's voice came through. "Mrs. Vander Holt is happy. She's on her second glass of Dom. The dog is asleep." "Good. Let's get this bird in the air." Brock released the parking brake and signaled the ground crew. But nothing happened. The tug didn't move. "Ground, this is Vanguard 409. We are ready for push," Brock said into his headset. "Negative 409. The ground controller's voice crackled back. "Company orders. You are to hold position." Brock frowned. "Company orders. We're on schedule. We have a slot time. Correction 409. You are to return to gate. Reconnect jet bridge. Do not shut down engines, but prepare for door opening." Brock slammed his hand on the console. "What the hell is it, a maintenance light? Did we forget a bag? They didn't say captain, just return to gate." Unbelievable, Brock muttered. He turned the plane back toward the gate he had just left. He keyed the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We have a minor paperwork issue with ground control. We're going to pull back to the gate for a moment. Shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. Sit tight." In first class, Beatrice van der Holt rolled her eyes. Oh, for heaven's sake, it's always something. She took a sip of champagne and petted her Pomeranian. "At least we have the comfortable seats, right, Fifi?" The plane shuddered as it locked back into the gate. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off. Brock stood up. "I'm going to go see what these idiots want. Probably a catering mix-up." He opened the cockpit door and stepped into the galley. Tiffany was there, looking confused. "Open the door, Tiffany," Brock ordered. "Captain, should we disarm the slides?" "Just open it. Let's hear the bad news." Tiffany rotated the heavy handle and pushed the door open. The jet bridge was extended, but it wasn't a catering crew standing there. It was Arthur Miller, the station manager, looking pale and sweating. And standing next to him with her arms crossed and a terrifyingly serene expression was the woman in the jeans, the nobody from seat 1A. Brock blinked. He felt a surge of irritation. "You have got to be kidding me. Miller! You brought the plane back for her. I told you she's a security risk." Brock stepped forward, using his physical size to intimidate, blocking the doorway. "Ma'am, I don't know who you cried to, but once you're off my manifest, you stay off. This is a federal violation. You are interfering with a flight crew." "Step aside, Captain," Miller said, his voice shaking slightly. "No, you step aside, Arthur," Brock snapped. "I'm the captain of this vessel. I have the final say on who flies, and she does not fly." He pointed a finger at Vera. "You are trespassing. Get off my jet bridge before I put you in cuffs myself." Vera didn't flinch. She took one step forward, entering the threshold of the plane. "Actually, Brock," she said, using his first name with a deliberate lack of respect. "You have the final say on the operation of the aircraft during flight, but the ownership of the aircraft dictates who is employed to fly it." Brock laughed, a cruel, incredulous sound. "Ownership. What are you a shareholder? You own $10 of stock." Vera turned to Miller. "Director Miller, please inform Captain Halloway of the current chain of command." Miller cleared his throat. He looked at the other passengers, who were now craning their necks to see the commotion. Beatrice van der Holt had stood up, her champagne glass in hand. "Brock, what is she doing here?" Beatrice demanded. "Why is this peasant delaying my flight?" "Director Miller," Vera prompted. Miller took a deep breath. "Captain Halloway, this is Dr. Vera Toussaint. She is the principal owner of the private equity firm that acquired Vanguard Horizon 6 months ago. She is the owner of the airline, Brock." The silence that followed was louder than a jet engine. Brock's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His brain tried to process the information, but it jammed. Owner, this woman in the knit sweater. The one he had sneered at, Beatrice, gasped her hand, flying to her pearl necklace. That's impossible!" Brock stammered, his face turning a blotchy red. "I've never seen her at the board meetings. The owner is a holding company." "Which I control," Vera said. She stepped past him, entering the cabin. She stood at the front of first class, addressing the room. "I apologize for the delay, everyone," she said, her voice clear and authoritative. "My name is Vera Toussaint. I am indeed the owner of this airline. I was traveling undercover today to assess the quality of our service." She turned her gaze to Brock, who was now shrinking against the galley wall. "And I have found the service She continued to be deeply wanting. She looked at seat 1A, where Beatrice's dog was chewing on the leather armrest. "Mrs. van der Holt," Vera said pleasantly, "I believe you are in my seat." Beatrice looked at Brock for help, but the captain was staring at the floor, looking like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trap door. I, Beatrice stuttered. "I have status." "And I have the title deed," Vera replied. "But I'm not unreasonable. You may keep the seat." Beatrice let out a breath of relief. "However," Vera continued, her eyes hardening as she turned back to Brock, "this plane is not going anywhere with Captain Halloway at the controls." "Now wait a minute," Brock said, finding his voice. Panic was setting in. You can't do this. I have a union. I have rights. You can't ground a pilot because of a misunderstanding." "This wasn't a misunderstanding," Vera said, stepping closer to him until she was inches away. "You profiled me. You degraded me. And you abused your authority to grant favors to a friend. You violated 3 core values of this company in under 5 minutes. You are not fit to wear those wings." She turned to Miller. "Director, is the reserve captain available?" "Yes, ma'am. Captain Sowell is in the crew lounge. He can be here in 10 minutes. "Good," Vera said. "Call him." She looked back at Brock. "Captain Halloway, grab your flight bag. You are relieved of command. You will escort yourself off this aircraft immediately." Brock looked around. The first officer. David was staring at him with wide eyes. Tiffany was looking down at her shoes. The passengers were watching with rapt attention. The guy in 3A was live streaming and the comments were likely exploding. "You can't fire me," Brock hissed. "I'm the best pilot you have." "You aren't being fired yet, Brock," Vera said softly. "That happens at the hearing on Monday. Right now, you're just being evicted to make room for a VIP." She pointed to the door. "Go. Now." Brock Halloway, the king of the sky, looked at the open door. He looked at the woman he had called trash. He grit his teeth, grabbed his heavy flight case, and began the long, humiliating walk of shame down the jet bridge, past the staring ground crew, and into a future that had suddenly become very uncertain. But Vera wasn't done yet. She turned her attention to the rest of the cabin. The Karma was just warming up. The atmosphere on Flight 409 had shifted from a luxury experience to a high-stakes interrogation room at 35,000 feet. Captain Sowell, the reserve pilot, had arrived within 12 minutes. He was an older man with salt and pepper hair and a demeanor that radiated calm professionalism, a stark contrast to Brock Halloway's volatile arrogance. He had shaken Vera's hand, apologized for the delay, and immediately begun his pre-flight checks without a single complaint. Vera had chosen to remain on the flight. She took seat 1F directly across the aisle from Mrs. Beatrice van der Holt in 1A. As the Vanguard Horizon Dreamliner finally roared down the runway and lifted into the clouds, the silence in the first-class cabin was deafening. The partition between seats 1A and 1F was lowered, meaning Beatrice and Vera were technically facing each other. Beatrice, usually the queen of conversation, was desperately pretending to read a magazine. Her hands were trembling slightly, causing the pages to rattle. She had spent the last hour demanding the pilot remove this woman. Now she was trapped in a metal tube with the woman who owned the plane. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Tiffany, the flight attendant, emerged from the galley. She looked like she was walking to the gallows. Her usually perfect foundation was shiny with sweat. She approached Vera first, ignoring the standard protocol of serving 1A first. Dr. Toussaint. Tiffany stammered, holding a silver tray with a hot towel. "Can I get you anything? We have the vintage champagne, or I can brew a fresh pot of Blue Mountain coffee." Vera accepted the towel. "Thank you, Tiffany. A sparkling water with lime will be fine." "Right away. And for lunch, we have the lobster thermidor or the Wagyu beef." "I'll have the vegetarian option," Vera said. Tiffany froze. "The vegetarian option? Yes, it's on the menu, isn't it? The roasted vegetable tart." I believe we didn't load any, ma'am," Tiffany whispered, looking terrified. "Captain Halloway. He usually tells catering not to bother with the rabbit food because VIPs don't order it. He prefers extra steaks for the crew." Vera picked up her notebook. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. So the former captain was altering catering orders based on personal preference, violating the dietary inclusivity policy. I didn't..." Tiffany trailed off. "It's not your fault, Tiffany," Vera said, writing it down. "Just bring me the salad from the side of the beef dish. That will suffice." Across the aisle, Beatrice Vanderholt decided to make her move. She lowered her magazine slowly, forcing a bright, brittle smile. "Well," Beatrice let out a nervous laugh. "This is certainly unexpected. You know, dear, when I said those things earlier, I was simply stressed. My little Fifi gets so anxious when we don't have the bulkhead." Vera turned her head slowly to look at the heiress. She took a sip of the water Tiffany had just placed down. "Mrs. Vanderholt," Vera said calmly, "you called me a peasant. You accused me of being a security risk. You encouraged the captain to have me arrested." "Oh, just banter." Beatrice waved a hand dismissively, her jewelry clanking. "Airports are so high pressure. We all say things we don't mean. I'm sure a woman of your stature understands the need for standards." "I do understand standards," Vera agreed. "That is why I bought this airline. To raise them." Beatrice's smile faltered. "Yes, well, I'm a platinum member, as you know. I spend a fortune with Vanguard. I'm sure we can put this unpleasantness behind us. Perhaps over a drink I'd love to hear about your acquisition strategies." It was a naked attempt to leverage her social status to smooth over the abuse. Beatrice was used to money fixing bad manners. Vera didn't smile back. "Mrs. Vanderholt, your platinum status is a loyalty program, not a license to abuse staff or fellow passengers. I am currently reviewing the passenger incident reports for the last 5 years. I'm curious to see if today was an isolated incident or a pattern of behavior." Beatrice paled. You're checking my file." "I check everything," Vera said, returning her attention to her notebook. "Enjoy your flight. I suggest you make the most of it." The rest of the flight was a masterclass in awkwardness. Vera moved through the cabin not as a tyrant, but as an auditor. She checked the cleanliness of the lavatories, finding them acceptable but not exceptional. She tested the Wi-Fi speed slow. She noted that the flight attendants were exhausted, clearly understaffed for a full cabin. When she spoke to Tiffany in the galley later, the flight attendant flinched. "Relax, Tiffany," Vera said gently. "I'm not going to fire you for Brock's mistakes, but tell me the truth. How often did he do things like that? Kick people out of seats?" Tiffany looked around to make sure she was alone, then whispered, "All the time. If he liked a passenger, they got upgrades. If he didn't like someone's look too casual, too loud, or, not the right fit, he'd find a reason to move them. He called the airline his personal flying club. We were all too scared to report him. He's friends with the chief pilot." Vera's eyes darkened. Friends with the chief pilot, I see. He said he was untouchable, Tiffany added. Nobody is untouchable, Vera said. Gravity applies to everyone. The corporate headquarters of Vanguard Horizon was a glass monolith in downtown Chicago. On the top floor, in a boardroom with a panoramic view of Lake Michigan, the air conditioning was humming, but the room felt stiflingly hot. It was Monday morning, 8 a.m. Vera Toussaint sat at the head of the long mahogany table. She was no longer wearing the sweater and jeans. Today she was in a sharp charcoal grey suit that cost more than a mid-sized car. Her hair was styled to perfection, and her presence was terrifyingly calm. To her right sat the Director of Human Resources and the company's General Counsel. To her left sat the Chief Pilot, a man named Captain Reynolds, who looked like he had swallowed a lemon. And at the far end of the table sat Brock Halloway. Brock was not in uniform. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too tight across the shoulders. Next to him was his union representative, a man named Frank, who had a thick binder of documents and a combative expression. "Let's get this over with," Brock said, leaning back in his chair, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "I've already read the complaint. It's ridiculous. I exercised my captain's authority under FAA regulations to maintain order in the cabin. The passenger, Dr. Toussaint, was argumentative and refused a reasonable request to accommodate a disability issue." Frank, the union rep, tapped the binder. "Exactly. Article 12 of the Collective Bargaining Agreement states that a pilot's judgment on safety and cabin order is paramount. You can't discipline a captain for making a judgment call in the heat of the moment. We move to dismiss this hearing and reinstate Captain Halloway with full back pay for the suspended flight." Vera listened, her face unreadable. She waited until they were finished. "Are you done?" she asked softly. "We demand an apology," Brock added, pushing his luck. "For the public embarrassment on the jet bridge." Vera turned to the monitor on the wall. "Play the tape." The General Counsel pressed a button. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't the cockpit voice recorder. It was a shaky vertical video filmed from seat 3A. The young man on the plane had indeed live-streamed the entire event, and the legal team had secured the footage. The audio was crisp. "I don't care who you think you are. This seat belongs to a VIP. You need to grab your bag and move to the back. Loyalty matters. Status matters. You're a one-time blip on the radar. I am the rule book at 30,000 feet." The video ended with Brock sneering at Vera. Vera turned back to the table. "Captain's authority is designed to protect the safety of the flight, Mr. Halloway. It is not designed to protect your ego, nor is it a tool to discriminate against paying customers because you prefer the company of a socialite." "It was a stressful situation," Brock argued, sweat beading on his forehead. "I didn't know you were the owner. If I had known," and that Vera cut him off her voice like a whip crack, "is exactly the problem. If you treat the owner with respect, but a regular passenger with contempt, you have no integrity. But it gets worse." She slid a file folder down the long table. It stopped right in front of Captain Reynolds, the chief pilot. "Captain Reynolds," Vera said, "I had my team audit the flight logs for Captain Halloway for the last 3 years. We cross-referenced them with the passenger manifests." Reynolds opened the folder. His eyes widened. "We found a pattern," Vera continued. 27 documented instances where full-fare, first-class passengers were involuntarily downgraded or removed from the flight by Captain Halloway. In every single instance, the seat was then given to a friend of the captain or a high-status female passenger. And in 12 of those cases, the catering inventory showed discrepancies, champagne and caviar consumed but not accounted for. Brock turned pale. That's circumstantial. It's theft, Vera said, and it's fraud. You were running a personal fiefdom on my aircraft. You were bumping paying customers to impress your social circle. She looked at the union rep. Frank does the collective bargaining agreement, cover theft of company property, and systematic discrimination against passengers. Frank closed his binder. He looked at Brock, then back at Vera. He knew a losing battle when he saw one. The union cannot defend conduct that violates criminal law or constitutes gross negligence. "Frank," Brock shouted, "you're supposed to back me up. You're on your own." "Brock," Frank muttered, pulling his chair away. Vera stood up. "Brock Holloway, your employment with Vanguard Horizon is terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct. Furthermore, we are filing a formal report with the FAA regarding your abuse of authority, and we are suing you for the value of the stolen services estimated at $45,000. "You can't do that." Brock stood up, his face purple. "I'll never fly again. You'll ruin me." "You ruined yourself," Vera said. "You thought you were a god in the sky. But you forgot that gods only exist as long as people believe in them. Nobody believes in you anymore." She pointed to the door. "Security is waiting to escort you out. Leave your badge on the table." Brock looked around the room. No one would meet his eyes. Captain Reynolds. His old friend was studying the grain of the wood table. Brock slammed his badge down, cursing under his breath, and stormed out. The heavy door clicked shut. "Now," Vera said, sitting back down, "let's discuss Captain Reynolds. You signed off on his reviews for 3 years. Either you were incompetent or you were complicit. Which is it?" Reynolds looked up, fear in his eyes. The cleaning of the house had only just begun. Later that afternoon, Vera sat in her office, a cup of tea in her hand. Her assistant, a sharp young woman named Eleanor, walked in. "Dr. Toussaint, we have a situation on the customer service line." "What is it?" "It's Mrs. Beatrice van der Holt. She's trying to book a flight to Paris for Fashion Week, but she says her account is locked." Vera smiled. It was a small, cold smile. "It's not locked, Elena. It's terminated. She's threatening to sue. She says she has 2 million miles. Read her the terms and conditions," Vera said. Clause 7.3. Vanguard Horizon reserves the right to terminate membership for conduct that is abusive to staff or detrimental to the brand. Tell her that her miles have been voided, and tell her that if she wants to go to Paris, our competitor Air Titan has a lovely economy section. Eleanor grinned. "I'll let her know personally." Vera turned her chair to look out the window. A Vanguard plane was taking off, banking sharply into the blue sky. It was clean, it was efficient, and it was finally hers. But there was one loose end. The young man who had filmed the video. She needed to thank him. He had provided the smoking gun. "Eleanor," Vera called out. "Find out who was in seat 3A on flight 409. Send him a voucher for a round-trip ticket anywhere we fly. First class." "Yes, ma'am. And what should the note say?" Vera thought for a moment. "Just say, 'Thanks for the view. The landlord.'" 1 year later, the wind howled across the tarmac of the Anchorage cargo depot in Alaska, whipping snow into swirling devils that danced in the pale gray light. It was 3:00 a.m., and the temperature was 20 degrees below zero. Brock Holloway stood shivering near the landing gear of a battered Douglas DC-8 freighter, a plane that was older than he was. He wasn't wearing a tailored uniform with gold epaulets anymore. He was wearing a heavy, grease-stained parka and thick, insulated boots. "Hey, Holloway," the loading supervisor shouted over the roar of a forklift. "Quit staring at the sky and sign the manifest. We're burning fuel here." I'm coming," Brock muttered, trudging through the slush. After the Monday morning massacre at Vanguard Horizon, Brock's name had become poison in the commercial aviation industry. The FAA report on his abuse of authority had flagged him as a liability. No major carrier, not Delta, not United, not even the budget airlines would touch him. He had lost his seniority, his pension, and his pride. Now he flew frozen fish and mining equipment on the graveyard shift for Polar Freight. There were no flight attendants to bring him coffee. There were no heated towels. There was just the drone of the engines and the smell of hydraulic fluid. As he signed the clipboard, a roar overhead made him look up. High above the clouds, a silver speck caught the first rays of the morning sun. It was a Vanguard Horizon Dreamliner, cruising at 40,000 feet, heading somewhere warm and expensive like Tokyo or Honolulu. Brock watched it go, a knot of bitterness tightening in his stomach. That used to be his kingdom. Now he was just a peasant looking up at the castle. He spat into the snow, grabbed his cold thermos of instant coffee, and climbed the rusty ladder into the freezing cockpit. Thousands of miles away at JFK Terminal 4, the scene was very different. The check-in counters for Vanguard Horizon had been redesigned. They were sleek, open, and welcoming. The staff were smiling, genuinely smiling, because the new management had increased wages and improved working conditions. But over at the counter for Budget Air, a low-cost carrier, known for its cramped seats and hidden fees, chaos reigned. Mrs. Beatrice van der Holt stood in a line that snaked back toward the entrance doors. She was sweating in her fur coat. She dragged a Louis Vuitton suitcase that looked beaten and scuffed. "Next," the agent yelled. Beatrice stepped up, trying to summon her old imperious air. "I am checking in for Miami, and I demand a window seat. I simply cannot sit in the middle." The agent, a young woman chewing gum, didn't even look up. "Zone 4 boarding. Seats are assigned at the gate. If you want to pick a seat, that's a $50 fee." $50? Beatrice gasped. "That is extortion. Do you know who I am?" The agent looked up, bored. "Yeah. You're the lady holding up the line. You want to pay or not?" Beatrice looked around. There were no porters rushing to help her, no managers bowing. Since losing her status with Vanguard and being blacklisted by their partner airlines, she had been forced into the wild west of budget travel. Her friends in high society had quietly stopped inviting her to trips, embarrassed by her public downfall and her inability to secure VIP treatment. I'll pay," Beatrice whispered, fumbling for her credit card. "Declined," the agent said after a moment. "What?" "Card declined. Insufficient funds." Beatrice froze. Her legal battles with Vanguard, combined with a sudden audit by the IRS, rumored to have been triggered by a tip about unreported gifts, had drained her liquidity. "Move it along, lady," someone shouted from behind her. Beatrice van der Holt. The woman who once evicted the owner of an airline grabbed her bag and shuffled away from the counter, tears stinging her eyes. She sat on a hard plastic bench near the restrooms, watching the elite passengers walk toward the Vanguard lounge, a paradise she was forever barred from entering. Inside the Vanguard first-class lounge, the atmosphere was serene. Soft jazz played. The scent of fresh orchids filled the air. Dr. Vera Toussaint sat in a corner alcove, reviewing the quarterly reports on her tablet. The numbers were excellent. Vanguard Horizon was now rated the #1 airline for customer satisfaction in North America. Dr. Toussaint. Vera looked up. It was Tiffany. Tiffany was no longer wearing the standard flight attendant uniform. She was wearing the navy blue blazer of a cabin service director. She looked confident, happy, and professional. "Hello, Tiffany." Vera smiled, closing her tablet. "How is the new training program going?" "It's wonderful," Tiffany said, beaming. "The new protocols on inclusivity and de-escalation. The crew loves them. We feel supported. We feel like we can actually take care of people without walking on eggshells." "That was the goal," Vera said. "Happy crews make happy passengers." "Oh, I have something for you," Tiffany said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small handwritten note. This came from the young man in 3A, the one who filmed the video. He used the voucher you gave him to fly his grandmother to visit him. He wanted you to have this. Vera took the note. It was simple. "To the lady in 1A, thanks for showing us that even the sky has limits for bullies. You're the real captain now." Vera tucked the note into her pocket. She looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the tarmac. A Vanguard jet was pushing back the sun glinting off its nose. She had bought the airline as a business investment, but she had kept it as a statement that dignity is not for sale, that respect is not a luxury add-on, and that sometimes the person you try to step on is the one holding the ground beneath your feet. Vera picked up her tote bag, the same simple leather tote. "Ready for your flight to Paris, Dr. Toussaint?" Tiffany asked. "I blocked off seat 1A for you." Vera laughed softly. "Actually, Tiffany put me in 1F. I like the view better from there. And let's give 1A to that soldier I saw in the lobby. He looks like he could use the leg room." Tiffany smiled. "Yes, ma'am. Right away." Vera walked toward the gate, not as a queen, but as a leader. She didn't need the best seat to know her worth. She owned the whole scam. The downfall of Captain Brock Halloway and the humiliation of Beatrice van der Holt serve as a stark reminder that hubris is a heavy carry-on item. Eventually, you have to pay the price. In a world obsessed with status and appearances, it is easy to forget that true power often moves in silence. Vera Toussaint didn't need to shout to prove her authority. She simply let the weight of her actions speak for her. The next time you find yourself judging a stranger by their clothes or assuming you are the most important person in the room, remember the woman in seat 1A. You never know when you might be trying to evict the landlord. Treat everyone with respect, not because of who they are, but because of who you are. Because in the end, the altitude doesn't matter if you have no character. Wow, what a ride. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying justice and instant karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel soar to new heights. Did you think the captain got what he deserved? Or should Vera have been even harsher? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories about entitled people getting a reality check, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind or be grounded. See you in the next one.